On the night of August 4, 1962, the world's most desired woman was found lifeless in her Los Angeles home. Marilyn Monroe, Hollywood's golden goddess, the ultimate dream of fame and beauty, was gone at only 36. The official report said, acute barbiturate poisoning. The tabloids called it a tragedy. But behind the locked doors of her Brentwood bedroom, the story didn't fit so neatly. Her phone lines were mysteriously cut, the timeline of her last calls shifted, and those closest to her, including members of the Kennedy family, disappeared into silence. Just 3 months earlier, she had whispered, "Happy birthday, Mr. President," to John F. Kennedy in front of the entire nation. Wrapped in a dress that shimmered like liquid light, it was the performance that made her immortal, and possibly the one that sealed her fate. Who was Marilyn Monroe, really? A fragile woman destroyed by fame? Or a dangerous secret the powerful couldn't afford to keep alive? Long before she became Marilyn Monroe, she was Norma Jeane Mortensen, a little girl born on June 1, 1926, in Los Angeles, to a mother who could not care for her and a father she never knew. Her mother, Gladys Baker, worked as a film cutter in Hollywood but struggled with severe mental illness. Her father's identity remained uncertain. Some claimed he was a studio co-worker, others a passing stranger. What was certain was that Norma Jeane entered the world already marked by instability. Her earliest memories were of orphanages and foster homes, moving from one stranger's house to another. At times, she lived with families who treated her kindly, other times, she was neglected or worse. By age 8, she had already been assaulted, an event she would later recall in painful fragments. When her mother was institutionalized, Norma Jeane became a ward of the state. The bright lights of Hollywood, which she could see flickering in the distance, seemed like another planet, one that promised love, stability, and recognition she never received as a child. Despite the chaos, she developed an inner resilience. She read obsessively, wrote poetry, and dreamed of becoming someone extraordinary. Her favorite pastime was standing before the mirror, imitating the movie stars she saw on screen: Greta Garbo, Jean Harlow, Claudette Colbert. She didn't just want to watch them, she wanted to become one of them. Her difficult childhood carved two opposing forces inside her: a hunger for affection and a fear of abandonment. These wounds would follow her into adulthood, shaping her relationships, her art, and even her demise. From the beginning, Norma Jeane wasn't chasing fame, she was chasing safety. The illusion that adoration could protect her from loneliness. Norma Jeane's teenage years were defined by survival rather than schooling. She attended Van Nuys High School in Los Angeles. Shy but striking, already drawing glances from boys and whispers from girls. Yet her real education came not from classrooms but from the relentless need to stay afloat. When her foster family decided to move out of state, she faced the grim prospect of returning to the orphanage system. To escape it, she married her 21-year-old neighbor, James Doherty, just weeks after her 16th birthday. It was less a love story than a lifeline, a desperate attempt at stability in a world that had never given her any. While James served in the Merchant Marine during World War II, Norma Jeane worked in a munitions factory inspecting parachutes. It was there, in 1944, that her life took an unexpected turn. A military photographer visiting the plant noticed her photogenic charm, the radiant smile, the natural poise, and snapped a few pictures. Those photos landed in the hands of a modeling agency, and suddenly, the lonely factory girl was in front of a camera instead of behind a workbench. Within months, she dyed her hair platinum blonde, changed her name to Marilyn Monroe, and signed her first contract with the Blue Book modeling agency. Her new persona, the blend of innocence and sensuality, quickly made her one of the most sought-after pin-up models in the country. But modeling was only the beginning. Acting lessons followed, along with endless studio auditions. She was told her voice was too soft, her walk too exaggerated, her personality too much. Yet she absorbed every rejection like fuel. Marilyn Monroe was not an overnight miracle, she was built. Pose by pose, heartbreak by heartbreak, What began as a way to escape poverty was now a burning ambition: to prove that the orphan girl from Los Angeles could be more than just another pretty face in a magazine. By the early 1950s, the name Marilyn Monroe had begun to shimmer across Hollywood like a promise. Her early film appearances were brief: a secretary here, a chorus girl there, but audiences couldn't look away. The camera adored her in a way that seemed almost supernatural. Still, behind every seductive glance and breathy laugh was a woman meticulously crafting her image. She studied screen legends, memorized camera angles, and even trained to control her voice into that soft, childlike whisper the world would soon recognize instantly. Her big break came in 1950 with The Asphalt Jungle and All About Eve. Two small roles that turned heads in studio boardrooms. Within 2 years, 20th Century Fox offered her a new contract, and with it, the transformation from starlet to superstar. In 1953, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes catapulted her into global fame, as she sang "Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend" in a shocking pink gown. She didn't just perform a number, she embodied a cultural archetype, the blonde bombshell. The performance was replayed, imitated, and mythologized, turning Marilyn into both a fantasy and a prisoner of her own creation. Hollywood saw her as a product, not a person. Studio executives demanded she play the same roles: the dumb blonde, the seductress, the dream, but Marilyn yearned to be taken seriously. She read Dostoevsky and Freud, joined acting classes with Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio in New York, and fought for better scripts. When Fox refused, she famously walked out, creating her own production company, Marilyn Monroe Productions, in 1955. An unheard-of move for an actress at that time, it was both rebellion and revolution, proof that she was far more than the sum of her curves and red lips. Her comeback was triumphant. The 7-Year Itch, 1955, gave the world the iconic image of Marilyn standing above a subway grate, her white dress billowing as she laughed, a scene that would define pop culture for decades. But the image came at a cost. Behind the laughter, she was exhausted, over-medicated, and constantly scrutinized. Fame, she discovered, was a double-edged sword, dazzling under the spotlight, but lonely once it dimmed. By the late 1950s, Marilyn Monroe was no longer just an actress, she was a symbol of beauty, desire, and the impossible pressures of womanhood in an unforgiving industry. She had everything the world could offer: fame, fortune, and power, yet something vital was slipping away. For all her radiance on screen, Marilyn Monroe's love life was a storm she could never escape. Beneath the glamour, she craved tenderness, the simple kind of love she had been denied since childhood. But the men who loved her were drawn not to Norma Jeane, the fragile soul behind the smile, but to Marilyn, the myth, the fantasy they thought they possessed. Her first marriage, to James Doherty, ended quietly when her modeling career began to bloom. James wanted a housewife, Marilyn wanted the world. Their paths diverged as soon as ambition entered the room. In 1954, she married baseball legend Joe DiMaggio, one of America's most beloved sports icons. To the public, it was a union of dreams, the golden athlete and the golden girl. But behind closed doors, jealousy and misunderstanding poisoned everything. Joe adored her but couldn't bear the public attention she commanded. When he watched her famous subway grate scene in The 7-Year Itch, he was furious, humiliated that millions of men were staring at his wife's legs. Within 9 months, the marriage collapsed. Marilyn's next great love was playwright Arthur Miller, the intellectual opposite of DiMaggio. He understood her mind, encouraged her to study and think deeply. They married in 1956. And for a time, she seemed to have found peace. Yet even this marriage crumbled under the weight of her insecurities and his disillusionment. Miller began writing about her fragility, her dependence on pills, her desperate need for approval, and Marilyn felt exposed, betrayed. Between these marriages and brief affairs, there were whispers of countless lovers, including co-stars, producers, and the most dangerous rumor of all, President John F. Kennedy. Some claimed she was infatuated with him, Others said she had been used and discarded. The infamous "Happy Birthday, Mr. President" performance in 1962 turned the Whispers into an international scandal. Her shimmering gown, her sultry voice, and the intimacy of her gaze toward the president sent shockwaves through the political world. In every romance, Marilyn searched for the same thing she had wanted since she was a girl: safety. But love, for her, was never safe. The brighter she shone, the more fragile she became, until even affection began to feel like a threat. By 1962, the legend of Marilyn Monroe had reached its blinding peak, and her private world was falling apart. The woman who once embodied Hollywood's dream had become its cautionary tale. Years of overwork, insomnia, and emotional turmoil had driven her into dependence on barbiturates and alcohol. Her public smile was flawless, but in her diaries she wrote of loneliness, fear, and feeling like a fragment of glass about to crack. The greatest scandal of her life was one she never had the chance to explain. Her rumored affair with President John F. Kennedy, and later his brother Robert Kennedy, became one of the most whispered secrets in America. She had been seen at private gatherings, her phone tapped, her movements tracked by both the FBI and the Secret Service. Friends said she felt she knew too much about the Kennedys, about government secrets, about the men who ruled the world. Others insisted it was fantasy, born from the desperation of a woman fading from fame. Whatever the truth, the boundary between power and desire had become lethal. In early 1962, Marilyn was fired from the set of Something's Got to Give after repeated absences. The studio cited illness, but behind the scenes, her mental state was deteriorating. She felt betrayed by Hollywood, by the men who had used her, and by a system that built her into an icon only to abandon her when she faltered. Still, she tried to reclaim control. She hired new staff, reconnected with Joe DiMaggio, and began planning a fresh start. Yet the closer she came to recovery, the more dangerous her world seemed. Then came the night of August 4, 1962. Marilyn spoke with friends, made calls, and then, silence. Her housekeeper found her locked in her bedroom, unresponsive. The police arrived before dawn. The official cause: acute barbiturate poisoning. But almost immediately, inconsistencies surfaced. No glass of water near the bed despite the ingestion of over 40 pills. Broken timelines of calls, vanishing diaries, witnesses who changed their stories, and most chillingly, reports of Robert Kennedy's presence in Los Angeles that same evening. Conspiracy theories multiplied. That she had been silenced to protect the Kennedys. That her death was staged. That her psychiatrist and housekeeper were complicit. Others believed she had simply taken too many pills, overwhelmed by depression. Whatever the truth, the aftermath felt orchestrated, controlled, manicured, and eerily efficient. Within hours, her personal effects were seized, her home sealed, her story rewritten. Marilyn Monroe's death was officially ruled a probable suicide, but few believed it was that simple. In life, she had been a symbol of power and desire. In death, she became a symbol of secrecy and manipulation. The tragedy was not only that she died young, but that she never had the chance to tell her side of the story. Her funeral, arranged quietly by Joe DiMaggio, was closed to most of Hollywood. He banned the studio executives, the politicians, and anyone who had profited from her fame. On her casket, he placed a single bouquet of red roses and whispered, "I love you." For 20 years after, he sent fresh flowers to her grave every week. The scandal of Marilyn's death remains unsolved, not because the truth is lost, but because too many wanted it buried. In the wake of her death, the world was paralyzed. Newspapers splashed her photo across front pages, radio hosts spoke in hushed tones, and millions of fans wept as if they had lost someone they personally knew. Marilyn Monroe had been more than a celebrity. She was a fantasy stitched into the fabric of post-war America, and her sudden end tore that illusion apart. Hollywood, once eager to exploit her beauty, now hurried to romanticize her tragedy. Within days, rumors turned into legend. Some claimed she had been silenced for political reasons. Others saw her as the ultimate victim of fame. The FBI opened files. Journalists chased shadows. Conspiracy theorists still debate the evidence 6 decades later. Yet through all the noise, one truth echoed. Marilyn's death exposed the dark machinery of celebrity culture. The way the system created stars only to consume them. For a time, it seemed as though her story would end there, locked in the golden coffin of nostalgia. But even in death, Marilyn refused to fade. In the late 1960s and 70s, as feminism rose and women began questioning the roles forced upon them, Marilyn's image took on new meaning. She was no longer just the dumb blonde. She became a symbol of how intelligence, talent, and independence were often punished in women who dared to shine too brightly. Her films were reissued, her photographs rediscovered, and her quotes, poetic, lonely, defiant, began circulating like gospel. "I restore myself when I'm alone," she had once said, revealing more wisdom than Hollywood ever credited her for. Scholars studied her life. Artists painted her face. Musicians sang about her name. Andy Warhol's iconic silk screen portrait turned her into an eternal muse, forever smiling, forever untouchable. In her absence, Marilyn achieved what she had always sought in life: permanence. She became the eternal paradox, both victim and victor. Fragile and immortal, the comeback she never lived to make unfolded without her, turning the tragedy of Norma Jeane into the mythology of Marilyn Monroe. Yet even now, as her story is retold through films, documentaries, and books, one question lingers in every retelling. Was she ever truly seen, or just endlessly imagined? More than 60 years have passed since Marilyn Monroe's final night, yet her presence lingers, haunting, radiant, and endlessly reinterpreted. She remains everywhere, on billboards, in films, on coffee mugs, and in the collective imagination of a world still fascinated by beauty and destruction. To this day, Marilyn is not just remembered, she is resurrected, reinvented, and redefined with every generation. Modern culture has turned her into a mirror. For some, she is the ultimate cautionary tale about fame's cruelty, a woman crushed by the machinery of power and male desire. For others, she represents resilience, a survivor who carved her name into history despite impossible odds. Hollywood continues to mine her story, from glossy biopics like Blonde to documentaries searching for the real Marilyn. Yet perhaps that's the final truth: there was never one Marilyn Monroe. There was the studio's Marilyn, the public's Marilyn, the Kennedys' Marilyn, and deep beneath them all, Norma Jeane, the lost child who wanted to be loved. Even her grave at Westwood Memorial Park has become a place of pilgrimage. Covered year-round with lipstick kisses and letters from strangers. They come not to mourn, but to confess, to whisper to a woman who, in death, still understands their loneliness. Time has not dulled her mystery. The files remain sealed, the contradictions unresolved, but maybe that's why she endures. Marilyn Monroe was never meant to be understood, only remembered. And so, we are left with the same question that began her legend. Was she a fragile soul destroyed by the spotlight, or a woman who learned too late that the spotlight was never meant to save her? The truth may be forever hidden in the shadows of that August night, but the legend of Marilyn Monroe will never die.